Yearning to play a few rounds of Gwent. That ought to set me straight.
Welcome, my friends, to Commander's Horn, episode 108. We are live here with two top 10 players of Season 8, both members of Team Leviathan, Alessio1996 and Green Knight. And we've had a week with the latest Gwent patch, which brought a load of changes, 5 new leaders, lots to talk about. Let's get into it, my friends.
Hello there.
All right. Just have a slight scene issue here. I will get the scene transferred over right now. All right. No, but I got this new layout, so I have the new layout. So there are some hiccups, and there's extra preparation that goes into every podcast that involves these, awesome little overlays that I have. Again, shout out to TN Gabor. I'll shout you out every episode for this layout. So good afternoon, everybody. It is February 7th, 2019. Great day for your weekly Gwent podcast. And there's a lot of people that are maybe getting back into the game, rediscovering the game. So if it's your first time watching the podcast, we have a good one for you. So thanks for coming in. And this episode of Commander's Horn is recorded live here at twitch.tv/McBearded and will be posted on YouTube, where you can find all episodes of Commander's Horn at youtube.com/c/McBeard on the Commander's Horn playlist. Usually recording on Thursdays, start time varying due to the guests, but the podcast is posted on iTunes and YouTube no later than Friday. And finally, this episode is brought to you by the Commandos. Patrons at patreon.com/commandershorn. Shout out to our newest member, Max W. So there's a lot going on with Gwent right now, gentlemen. Green Knight, Alessio1996. There's a lot going on. First of all, Alessio1996, do you prefer to go by Ultraman, or do you prefer to go by your screener in Gwent, which is Alessio1996? Like, just for conversation purposes, just so people can kind of nail down an identity for you.
I rather like Ultraman. I mean, the first one was basically when I first played The Witcher 3, when I started a GOG account, and I was like, fuck off, I'm just gonna enter my birth date and
sign up for the beta.
This shit's gonna go smooth, and then I realized I was gonna get called like that for years, and that GOG support actually takes time to answer you.
Okay.
And I am really lazy, and I should probably change that at some point.
Well, the good part is, because you qualified for Gwent Open, you're going to be going to the GOG offices. You can just walk right in there and say, "Hey, pick up the phone, guys. I'm Ultraman. Don't you know who I am?"
Oh my god, that's even more arrogant than I am.
It's a funny scene in my head for sure. Green Knight, what is the story behind Green Knight exactly? This isn't in the notes, but I am just curious why. It's very specific, right? It's a color, it's a profession, but it must mean something to you. You do have the icon from, I can't remember the name. What is the name of the game with the Knights from? It was an Xbox Live game.
So this is the funny thing. I actually just picked up the icon just because I thought, hey, there's a Green Knight. I need a Discord icon. Why not? But the name's actually from, I used to be a chess player, so I just like the color green, and that was my nickname. I'm kind of stuck.
Well, it's good because green is kind of a Gwent color, you could say. So, so there is that at least. And now it's going to bug me now because, okay, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's an Xbox Live game. It's like a side-scrolling beat 'em up. Everybody plays a knight, and I can't show the icon right now on the screen, but it's going to bother me.
I have no idea.
So I think Castle Crashers. Thank you, Invincible is Castle Crashers. Okay. So I just want to talk just real quick before we jump into the news. It's kind of a big week right now. We're seeing a lot of players return to Gwent right now. Some popular streamers are bringing in big numbers. Some even that ran very high profile I'm Leaving campaigns. They've been playing the game this week live on Twitch, turning eyes back onto a game that probably a lot of people looked away from. And what once was seen as a dying game, a game that had a monumental task of reinventing itself, really feels like it's on the upswing, and it's doing that. And I think that, between the drowling, the howling drama, the news, the narrative about the release of the competing card game Artifact. Now Gwent boasting over 10 times the viewers. Of course, it's all relative. I am talking about hundreds and thousands and not like 5 digits, but I am, it is all relative. But, on Reddit, a guy playing Demba and Sheep right now just reached pro rank, which is refreshing. Every time I stream, I run into a diverse amount of lists. A lot of Woodland, but outside of Woodland, there's a lot there. And I feel like Gwent, I don't know if I'm ready to say it, but I feel like this could be another golden age dawning for Gwent, something that hasn't really been felt since Challenger 2. Green Knight, Alessio, what do you feel about the state of the game? Are you happy? Are you concerned? You see it from the competitive level, but you also share the excitement of the fans, I imagine. Green Knight, how do you feel about the state of Gwent right now?
To be honest, the concern side is starting to fade away, and it's just more excited. Like the new leaders and all the balance changes really help the game. But yeah, like I think Gwent's it's definitely on the up. It's getting better. It's definitely in a much better state than say Season 1. We all remember that, the no unit artifact decks and all that kind of stuff.
It's true, yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to see. I think we're getting a bunch of new cards in the not too distant future, right? So that'll be interesting to see what effect that has on the game. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah. Alessio, what about you? How do you feel about the state of the game at the moment?
Well, pretty good. I have to say, like, I think I said on Discord yesterday that it was like, we've made the full list, right? Returning players, returning streamers, 2+K viewers on Twitch. I mean, yeah, this you named it. It is a golden age. I mean, not like Berserk's one for those who knows about those kind of shit because I'm a weeb, but actually one that doesn't end so bad as I hope at least.
I didn't get the reference.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a weeb reference.
Yeah.
Some might get it. Maybe one. If only one get it, I will be happy.
Right on.
But yeah, I mean, that's a really cool time to be playing Gwent. The game is cool. The game is good. Obviously not every single day because the zoo after a patch is sometimes a bit frustrating, especially for me. I like to know what to expect from my opponents, and sometimes I'm like, seriously? Mm-hmm. Did you just use that card? In anything, but the game in itself is pretty good. I'm having a lot of fun. What could go wrong at this point, right?
Oh man,
the game has never been as good since midwinter. Oh shiz, I jinxed.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like during Midwinter 2, like the game wasn't perfect by any means. Like Midwinter, I mean, sorry, not Midwinter. I mean, like right before Midwinter, like during Challenger 2, there were still a lot of problems. Like that tournament Challenger 2 was like super one-sided. So many sweeps. Like it was just, decks were really, really consistent. And, it's hard for me to completely dive back into the mindset, but I mean, it felt really good then as well. It was bigger then, obviously. Like when we're talking about like player base, when we're talking about activity, we are on the upswing, but we aren't quite at that level. I don't know if we'll be back there for a while.
Not yet.
But World Masters is coming up, and I'm sure it's on the calendar internally at CDPR. So there's probably some huge plans for that. And before that, we're going to get an expansion. Expansion's going to be coming before Gwent Challenger happens. So it's all happening really soon. A popular conversation that I've been seeing, which is like the most backwards and inside-out conversation that I've ever seen about a card game, is that maybe too much is happening too soon. It seems to be more about people thinking about new leaders being added might be too soon. But how do you guys feel about content incoming, especially Green Knight, as you prepare to do it? I imagine you're doing the qualifier. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but you're going to be doing the qualifier for Gwent Open number 8, which is this weekend on the 9th and 10th. And the game just got patched. So you're just, you're reorganizing kind of what was good during the season you were pushing. And then we'll have this new tournament, Gwent Open number 8, and then we'll have an expansion, and everything will change again, and everything will continue to change on a fairly regular basis, it seems. How do you feel about the speed in which content is being added to Gwent?
I think it's great. I love it. I think if nothing changes, then things kind of become stale a little bit. But I really like the speed. So, for example, we've got the qualifiers coming up. it's a little bit stressful when you've only got a week to try and get grips on the new decks and stuff. But yeah, I like it, and I can't wait for the expansion when we get all the new cards and King Radovid returns.
I mean, we can only we can only hope and speculate about what the future is. I mean, there's been some convincing cases about, you know, if there was another faction that was around Novigrad, that there would be like a whole chunk of leaders. So you could say that maybe Radovid would be coming with a new faction. But then there's other people that entertain the conversation that Northern Realms doesn't need to be split because there's already there's not enough difference between them. So, you know, two different directions perhaps. But, you know, I personally would like to see Dijkstra be a leader because I think that he's got leadership material.
That'd be cool.
And I think that Roach is doing a fine job in his place. How do you feel about the speed of leaders being added, Ultraman?
I mean, some leaders might change the whole game. Like, I would think about Garnicora, because basically they oblige you to play in a way Monster was not playing before. Basically trying to round you. You can actually pass. You're not obliged to win round 1, bleed round 2, and have a huge finish anymore. So some decks are truly changing the way factions work. But when you look at others like Meve, I mean, she's not changing anything in Northern Realm. She's just making units survive, which is actually really good.
Yeah.
Which is actually really good for Northern Realm. I have to say, that was the main problem.
Yeah, the removal. But I mean, yeah, it felt like Northern Realms just got a card added to their card pool that was just a really good card to run, which was Meve.
Exactly.
Yeah, but Garnicora is more like, actually feels like a full strategy.
So it depends a bit on which and what type of leader we get, right? If they're a bit more generic like Maeve, it's not a problem for anybody to follow about that, because it's like you said, it's almost like you're changing one card in a Foltest deck or 2 cards in a Foltest deck. So that's not hard to come by. When you think about Arnulf, Eldain, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, by the way.
That's right.
And what's the last out?
Ardell, yeah.
He has like 3 names, and I have no way to.
Nilfgaardian.
Well, they're all really original. They're all really original, and thus they're changing the way the faction plays as a whole, at least with them. So if you get like 5 of them every single month, I'm a bit afraid half of the month is gonna be like zoo type of ladder, you know, when everybody's trying shit and you're just like trying to figure out, oh my god, is he really trying to do a Garnicora artifact?
Yeah, right.
Did he not heard it was nerfed?
That's definitely something we're going to be talking about. I don't think we're going to get leaders every month, but I definitely think we're getting like 10 leaders in under 2.5 months. So that's, you know, that's definitely happening to the game right now. But yeah, we can move on. We can talk about a little bit of news here, because there's some news to talk about. We have a tournament on the horizon, an expansion following closely behind, like we talked about, and just, yeah, we're talking about. There's a lot of excitement. Gwent's making a promise, right? It promises to be very exciting for the rest of the year. I took a very short course about writing a book, and one of the main things that I learned is at the beginning of the book that you're writing, you want to make a promise to your reader. If you want to start the book exciting, you're promising the reader that it's going to be a thrilling book from start to finish. If you start the book very sad, it's going to be very emotional. So right now, I think that the book that Gwent is writing right now in 2019 is pretty exciting. And it's a nice feeling for people that have held on to the hope that things might turn around. So let's talk about a little bit of news after this. And yeah. So 2 pieces of news, like Alessio was just talking about right there. Garnicora did receive a hotfix that changes her properties of the ability where she puts the fruit on the board. So the leader now spawns the fruit instead of playing it before Garnicora's ability played the fruit, which would actually trigger the updated Ancient Spear and Wyvern Shield's effect of refreshing its charge when you play a unit. So you could play the spear, play a fruit, and then play a spear. And I don't think what it was doing was nuts, but it was not fun. And I don't think it was intended, because CD Projekt Red pivoted really fast on the fix, and we ended up getting a fix in less than 3 business days. It was just fixed on Monday, which is amazing for a multi-platform game. Guys, do you think that? I mean, it's hard to draw a conclusion. It's hard to draw a conclusion. I'm just going to throw it out there. One of you does have my voice on speakers, I think, or very close to your mic, so I can hear a little bit of my echo. I'm not quite sure. But I just wanted to ask you guys, when you have a reaction like this that is dealt with so fast, in that for a game that's on multi-platform, like I said, the speed of this hotfix was great. It was great that they could hotfix something like this, but does it give a little bit did they think that it was probably fine and then the outcry maybe changed their minds? Or do you think that it was just the two changes kind of met in the middle at the patch and just produced an unexpected interaction? Green Knight, what do you think happened here?
So I'm not entirely sure if they just overlooked it or underestimated it, but they clearly balanced the spear so that you can't play no unit artifact decks, and they wanted spear to be at most 1 per turn, but obviously with the new Gernakora leader, you could actually get a lot more out of it than that. And as soon as I realized, I was like, oh no. Here we go. And one of my teammates, Saber, he was like really excited to try it out, and I was like, what's wrong with you? We don't need this again.
Exactly. Why can't so many problems around these
I'm glad they changed it straight back. I'm glad they fixed it, because I don't think something like that would be healthy for the game.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's the thing. It wasn't a game breaking, but it wasn't fun. And I think that it probably didn't seem like it was too much of a big deal for them to make this change. The only big thing is that you can't position the fruit where you could before, because you actually were playing it on the board. Now it just appears on the row. That doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it is, like, you could say, if the intention was not intended, if the effect wasn't intended with the spear, and that's all that was changed, but you lose the ability to position the fruit, it is kind of sort of a slight nerf if Gernakora was still intended to be played in a certain way. But it's just interesting that they were able to change it. I think it's great, personally. Was Gernakora Artifact actually out there on the pro ladder? Were you seeing it up there, Alessio or Green Knight?
Not that much. I mean, I think I faced 2 of them, and basically I rolled over them so easily that I was just like, this can be problematic. And then I saw my Discord, and every single person was complaining about that, and was like, you see that much of them, / that's that hard to beat. And I just figure out something about artifacts that's a reason for what for why they're problematic for the game right now, at least in their design, is that good players are able to play around artifacts. Average player has more hard time playing against them. Like, it's just I cannot really make like a 3-line guide that's gonna win you every single artifacts game, but when I play against peers, when I expect them, I'm able to go and make them drop 1 or belittle the game by 1 turn, something like this, and then I'm winning in the end, so I'm not really raging against them. When I see the other people, though,
yeah. Well, there's also
that's much more difficult.
There's also the concern, like, for me, is what usually happens in that after a patch is that something very strong will show up, and it'll be maybe complained about, but then people may learn how to deal with it. But the other part of it is that the deck that seems very strong at first, which is arguably exploiting an unintended mechanic, and I think with the speed of the hotfix, we can say that this was unintended. That deck that's on day 1, day 2. That's on the weekend of the patch. What happens when a very strong deck gets refined that's exploiting something? Because I feel like Nilfgaard Handbuff of Vintage Gwent was a deck that was always pretty good, but when people started to really polish it, it got just so damn oppressive all the time, and it was so annoying. Like, it started off bad, and it just got worse and worse. So kind of cornering this, I guess, to make sure that even though if it wasn't game breaking, it's really not fun and doesn't seem right and doesn't seem to go along with the philosophy around artifacts. I'm glad they made the change really fast. But there was also an additional hotfix yesterday that addressed what cards would appear for selection in Arena, as it found out that you couldn't get starter cards there. So now you can get starter leaders and all starter cards in Arena, and also cards like Bribery that was emitting starter cards from its create pool now correctly create stuff from the starter deck. So there was a part where bribery was above average because it wasn't ever seeing a Witcher. That's like the main thing right there.
Yeah.
So now it bricks and it's got a much higher variance. And since Witchers are still pretty popular, you're choosing between Lambert or like, I don't know, like a Necro Warrior or whatever. Like it's not like you're seeing Selkirk Spear Tip like all the time, which definitely was happening. Selkirk was like 80 to 90% of the time I would get Selkirked when I was playing Northern Realms, which I was that week because it was like faction battle week and stuff, and I was playing so much Northern Realms, I swear those Nilfgaardians dropping Selkirk against me all the time. So this isn't like a big thing we can really talk about unless you guys are huge arena players, but I don't imagine you are. But it is good that bribery got a fix because it was too good. It was too good for a weird reason.
I agree.
Yeah, that was a bit strange.
Yeah, I don't think there needs to be like weirdness like that.
If it was better in arena, but it was certainly competitive, right? And it was just like a roll the dice card, and it was just kind of silly to have like a genuinely competitive card deciding games that was just pure chance, basically. Because some games
don't want to create anymore.
12.
Yeah, but it's interesting how create really shows how amazing it is when you take bad cards out of its RNG range, which it always felt like. That's the thing in Vintage Gwent. Like a card like Elven Scout or Slave Driver or whatever, like its range was almost always like it was like good to great. It was really, really hard to like truly brick those cards, which were also 1 to 2 points better than the cards themselves, which we were already getting. Plus, it found answers because the range was like really, really good for finding answers and weather clears, and it rips my heart out. But it's we have to go through the hard times, because when you create when you create a stable range for create, it's not that it makes it a better, more balanced card. It makes it less competitive. And create not being competitive is what we want, because man, watching the pro games where they would runestone a weather clear and that was making the difference, whereas they just as easily but because the percentage of getting the clear is higher, it's not wrong to run them. It sucks because you could or could not get it, and that was it. Like those were the chances.
I mean, there just feels bad cards, right? I mean, overall, even if they're bad in the end, and thus we're not playing them because they're bad, but it's not like because of the nerf or because they got less competitive, those cards are now good for the game. To me, they're still really bad for the game. Each of them, each create is bad for the game. Except maybe Old Im, because in beta she was actually choosing from your opponent deck, a bit like Barbary, but she was choosing between the silvers, if I remember correctly, and thus you were pretty sure of what you would get if you chose this option. So that was not a real create, that was more of
Same with Triss Telekinesis as well, in a way.
Variance.
Very small variance.
Like Bribery can literally be any card, right? Whereas Heim used to create just a small pool of cards. So yeah.
And even though Heim was good, very, very good card, but it didn't.
Best card of the game.
best gold in the game.
Heim was best gold in the game?
I think so.
Heim best.
She was crazy. She was a tutor for Spy and could never brick because of this second ability. I mean, that was so good at the time.
It was a rain fawn that could just create a win condition from nowhere.
It's
exactly.
true, yeah. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, right. I was struggling. I forgot about the second mode on Heim. I forgot that it was a tutor or, it's really good. Very good. I mean, what do you guys think in the chat? What do you guys think in the comments if you're watching this in the video? What do you think was the strongest gold in Old Gwent? Are you aligned with this one? I'll have to think about this one, but we're going to move on with the show because I want to talk to you guys about the pro ladder grind, because you guys know it very, very well. We got your boy Shadowplay Red in the chat here, just keeping people updated that Alessio directly qualified for Gwent Open number 8. I believe you ended up at number 6 this last season, and you were previously, what number were you in the December season, Alessio?
I was second,
right? Pretty good. Green Knight also in the top 10 as well, and a hopeful here for Team Leviathan going into the qualifiers this weekend. But I want to talk about this pro ladder grind, and I want to talk about preparing for this time out here in competitive Gwent as we get launching into these new tournaments. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys about that right after this.
Maybe not today and not tomorrow, but someday someone will find a way to take you down.
So we are still at the beginning of the season. For players looking to hit the top of the ladder, which generally you are those players, where does that approach start? Is there a faction you try to peak with early, or do you tend to play more experimental stuff, try to surprise players perhaps, especially after a patch when things can be a little shuffled up? Where does the approach start? I'll throw it to you first, Green Knight.
I think there's a few different approaches you can take, and mine definitely isn't the best necessarily. At the start of the season, I tend to do more experimenting than I would at the end of the season. But yeah, you just finish your placements with the 4 factions. Maybe you can finish your placements with all 5, and then you just sort of go from there, kind of thing. And you just use that time to sort of get a grasp on the meta. Try and get a grasp on which decks might be strong, and then it's usually after I finish my placements that I'll try and think to myself, right, what could be really good right now? Like, what could I play that's sort of unique, maybe not everybody else is playing, that is gonna, produce really good results?
And what about your approach, Ultraman?
I mean, the beginning of the season is pretty much useless, just because everybody is so low in MMR, right? That means that if you get to 2.5k, which we all get, at least in the top 10, very easily, you're gonna go and get 5 points. It's gonna be as hard, if not harder, than if you are at 2.6k at the end of the season. So the thing is, the beginning of the season is pretty much useless. No matter how you get to it, no matter what the patch is, even if you have the best possible deck, you're not gonna get to, that's pretty much impossible to get to like 2,600 at the beginning of the season. Kaliman proved me wrong one time by doing that, the 14, but he's pretty much the only one that ever did that. So yeah, Tailbot did that one time too, when he finished his placements going first into the pro ladder last season of beta, I think.
And both these players you're talking about, their scores for all factions in the last season were all above 2,600 for all factions, and some of them peak. They're just really impressive scores. You all obviously have very impressive scores.
Well, and since the beginning of the season is pretty much useless for huge triaders. Usually that's like holidays.
Yeah.
Basically, you're getting some rest, you're testing things. Now there is a qualifier, so actually the rest of my teammates cannot truly take holidays like I do, but I'm not playing that much, at least not as much as the end of the season. Usually I start playing a lot by the 20 or something like this, and the last 10 days, you're gonna go all in and play a lot, play well. That's actually the hardest part, not tilt, because one evening of tilting can ruin like 2 days of grinding. So
yeah,
just try not to tilt. That's the most important thing. If you're like less 20, you're gonna get back to it. If you're at your level at less 20, you're gonna get back
right
sooner or later, because you're winning more points than you're losing, at least if you're at a level. Once again,
I think
if you're at less 80, the run until you get to like it's so hard. It's just so hard. It's hard mentally. You've got to play so many games that have no impact on your scores, and you're just like, I'm playing those games because I need to, but that doesn't bring me anything, right? That's just, it's like farming. It's mindless farming, and that feels horrible. Seriously.
It's hard. The thing is, putting in like 1,000+ games in any short amount of time over and over again is it's very, very demanding. Like, the game doesn't care, your opponents don't care if you're having a bad day, right? It's just, you have to do it.
Exactly.
You got to get there, because that's the only way that number is going to improve. What do you do normally at the beginning of the season there, Green Knight? Do you oh yeah, we already went that way. But anyway, I'll just move on to the next one here because you put in good work, Green Knight. You achieved a good standing, but even the nature of the top 10 in Gwent isn't enough to secure a spot to Gwent Open number 8. So at what point in this very competitive like elite landscape do you have to be realistic about your chances when you're pushing on the pro ladder?
It depends what your goals are, right? So last season, obviously I wanted to finish as high as I could, but my main goal was actually to finish top 3 because that's what I needed to do to qualify directly. I would say within the last few days of the pro ladder, it was starting to become clear to me that was going to be very, very difficult to do. So, you know, I ended up just spending like the last 3 days playing Scoia'tael nonstop, kind of banging my head against the wall, trying to climb with that. I was unable to do that, and, you know, I only finished 10th. I think I could have finished higher, but my goal was to finish top 3, and I needed to get a certain faction to a certain standard to realistically have a chance to do that. But if your goal is just to finish top 50, then you could look at the previous season, see what scores were needed to finish top 50 that season, and then, you know, just take it bit by bit and say, this is where I want to be, and then try and do your best to get that kind of thing.
A lot of players know what that's like. Players that tried to get those elite borders back in the day, you had to, like, you know, you looked at the seasons like, all right, so what's the cutoff MMR for me to get like the top 10,000 border, the top 1,000 border? So yeah, it's just, you want to plan ahead. And I think that's, I think it's really good because the qualifiers make things a bit more open as well. So you can put in less work and have the same chance as, I mean, it's obviously probably doesn't feel great to know that you have the same chance as the number 100 player. Knowing that I'm not, and again, no shade on whoever that 100th person is. I don't know who that is or what their ranking is, but it is still an opportunity for people that want to push against this idea that you need to grind all the time to get there, because tournament play ultimately defines us all in the highest level. So, you know, getting through a qualifier tournament is it's hard to win 2 tournaments back to back because you kind of have to do that to be like that wild card, but it's not like we haven't seen that before. Alessio, take me through your last days on the ladder, because you were number 3. I know you're already inhaling. I saw your tweets. So you were number 3, ultimately fell to number 6, but thankfully still had enough crown points in the previous season to qualify for the Open. But you dealt with a few bugs that cost you to lose points. And you likely played until you were exhausted to maintain your spot, or you're fighting for survival at that point, because the further you slide down, as we just discussed with Green Knight, even an elite level is not enough to get the ticket to Poland sometimes. So at what point did you have to say, all right, I'm done, I'm going to let it go, this is as good as it's going to be? At what point was it, and did the Q bug, and you can explain it a little bit better to everybody, but the Q bug probably influenced your decision, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, so first thing first, that was not an easy season for me. I mean, I've got family that got sick, like real sick. I've had multiple going through hospitals and things like this. Not enough sleep, not enough leisures. I mean, no leisure, truly. And I went into that, and I was just like, I have this. I must do this. That's since 3 months now, because I've done 6 to 6 as a ranking. I'm considering Gwent as my job, basically. Still studying outside of it, but that's my main focus right now. And I had to do this. That was my goal. So I did. I think I was like the 25. I was less 50 in 2 factions. And I was like, oh my god, this is not looking well. I have this huge leap to take on, and it's gonna be real hard, and and I'm not feeling well, etc., etc. So I just went in like I told my teammates every single time. I just took the most regular list. I'm not a fancy guy, at least not usually. And I just went in and outplayed people. That's how I'm telling it. That's just
Okay.
And I just went full big brain, 12 hours a day for I don't know. I mean, more like 16 hours a day, really, for 3 days before the actual rush. And I got back at all my factions. The 2 last days, I had everything in. I had everything at peak. Everything at peak. The 3 last days. And then that happened. Then I was just higher than Talbot. Like, I think 10 points maybe. He had one more faction than me, so he was actually in a better spot than me, slightly at least. And I was just like, okay, 2 more days. 2 more days, you've got to do this 2 more days. And that's when the bug happened.
Oh, man. So the bug happened as you queued into an opponent and got the automatic loss?
Yeah, first game of the day. Actually, I wasn't even... I didn't knew it when it happened, because it's a queue bug that basically makes you play a game while you're still searching. So I apparently played 2-minute games against Fedfried that I lost, and I lost 12 points, which is the maximum you should lose in Pro Ladder, I think. So I lost 12 points, and then I won Casper and Cams in a row.
Tough customers.
And I realized after winning Casper, I realized, oh, I'm less 6. What happened?
Oh, you didn't even realize
so
it right
actually,
away.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my fucking god, no. So rather than taking actual plus 12 points, I started tanking MMR, and I already played like 3 really hard fought games at this point. If I had won those 12 points, I would have done a pause. Like, truly. Just, that's how you should do it. Like, you're winning 3 games in a row, take a pause, take a breather. Not long. I mean, you've got work to do, but... And then I was just like, I was destroyed. I was so angry. I was just going games after games after games, and this little tanking began, like where you're winning 2 games in a row, then you're losing 1, and winning 2, losing 1, winning 2, which is I mean, I'm winning 4 to 5 points and losing 10, so basically this is I wasn't climbing anything, and it lasted for 3 hours. And then I made a Shen lose, like 3 losses in a row. I switched to Scoia'tael, 3 losses in a row, and I said, fuck it. I said, fuck it. I said, I'm not even gonna play a single more game than this. I don't wanna play any more games today. Not even one at this point. Because if I do so, if I play another game today, I'm not gonna play Gwent anymore. That was up to this point. Wow. I was just uber tilted, uber tired. That was not possible to go any more deeper.
Push to the brink. Push to the brink.
Yeah.
Alessio, I hope you're well, and I hope things are getting better for you. It sounds like you went through some trials, and I imagine that it would have been like that like the possibility of you not making it after that story is like there's a universe out there where it's just like this heartbreaking story. But I mean, we've seen lots of players go through some I mean, grinding is not easy for anybody. I'm glad that a bug didn't cost you your spot, and sorry for everybody who's watching.
At least I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. For everybody watching the stream, there was a drop. Thankfully, I'm recording this on my hard drive as well, so that doesn't affect the podcast. It should be completely in one piece. And just sorry about that. I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't think it was actually on my end at all. But seems like everything's fine now. Green Knight qualifiers are coming up in 2 days, February 9th and 10th. Showtime for the first official qualifiers of the year, allowing 2 final players to grab tickets to Warsaw. Now, this is a tough question to ask because obviously you don't want to give away everything, but nobody watches this podcast anyway, so it's okay. You can tell me all your secrets. What does preparation look like for you, and what does preparation look like for the team now? When they have, you're not the only one. You're not the only one in the qualifiers. So what does it look like for the team, and how do you approach this?
So preparation for the team. We mostly just share ideas, share deck ideas. We do a little bit of scrimming from time to time, testing matchups. But personally, how do I feel about my preparation going into the qualifiers? It's not yet complete. I feel good about it. I feel relatively confident with what I'm planning to bring, my overall strategy. But yeah, still got a couple of days left to finalize some things. But yeah, feeling pretty confident.
Right on. And Alessio, you've already qualified, of course. So is your time at this point mostly preparing for the tournament? Are you taking a little bit of time off? Are you helping your teammates prepare? It's hard to divide that that loyalty, of course, because there's so many people, I'm sure. So how does it go? How does it go for you here?
Well, basically, I just offer my services, right? I was just like, if anybody wants to scrim, test something, I'm available, because I have nothing to do, right? For once, at this point, I have nothing to do. Ladder is not really meaningful right now, and they just come in, just tell me, I want to test that, do that, and that, and I'm just like, okay, let's go, let's play some games, because the problem with testing in ladder right now is, like I told you before, it's pretty much a zoo, so I mean, you're not gonna end up with a real thorough test if you just bring your deck through Eldine Trap.
What does zoo mean to you? When you say zoo, are you saying like it just could be anything? You could
it's a mess. Okay. It's a crazy mess. Nothing is figured out yet. Decks are not optimized, and thus if you're playing against that and you're like, okay, I'm 9-0, yeah, maybe your deck is still shitty. Maybe you're winning against shitty deck because the bad decks, right? You're not sure of the level of your opponent or even of the level of his deck. So, I mean, it's another story if you already face 9 Cry in a row and
you
had a good score, because those are actually, I would call them, optimized at least a bit. But if you're facing like, I don't know, Guernicora Artifact, Eldine Traps, then you're facing Philavendrel.
Dwarves?
You have very little chances to face that in a tourney meta, and all of them is pretty much impossible.
Well, that's one of the best parts about the tournaments is that you see the game. I mean, I always feel that Gwent has always been shown in the best light for tournaments, even tournaments where, like, look at Gwent Challenger 4, where the very strange greedy lineup ended up taking it because players could only tech ban so many things, so they would have to go through like these crazy games against Consume or that Olaf serialist. So like, that's not great for the game when you see a strategy just run wild against some of the best players in the game like that. But at the same time, having diversity has its own caveats, because it's when things are diverse, it's hard to prepare for the same thing. But in a tournament meta, when you are the diversity thing happens on the ladder, but in a tournament meta, you have a first look at what people think is good, what people think is good against the things that people think are good, and how that looks just in that bubble itself, because you don't see these lists on the ladder, and a lot of times tournament lists that are teched for certain matchups won't necessarily do against the entire field of the ladder anyway. So I'm really excited to see what happens in the tournament, because it's going to be a new look at the game completely. Even though we've been playing this version of the game for this long, it's still going to be a new, well, maybe not so much for you guys, because you guys have been teching for matchups and all that for a long time. But as far as Homecoming for the general audience watching, it could go either way. I think it can go all sorts of different ways, I should say. But the last thing I want to ask you guys, so this isn't the first time TLG has been involved in the Open. Radu Andrada had a breakout performance in Gwent Open number 7. Ultimately, a slight miscalculation, being her own worst enemy in a series that she likely would have won against Freddy Babes, who went on to the finals and to win the tournament. This team seems to be evolving very fast, hosting a number of top players such as Radu Andrada, Beardy Bog, Quillen Lance, and more. Shout out to all you guys. I know Saber is in the chat as well. But what is the team support meant for you as you go through these difficult pro ladder grinds? Greenhead, I'll throw that one to you first.
The team is awesome. I think the thing that the team offers most is just like friendship when you need it, advice. Yeah, it's full of great guys that we're all looking to just not carry each other at all, but just share ideas and have a laugh. I do feel really lucky to be on the team.
Right on. Ultraman, how does it help you? How does it help you as you go through like really tough days? As it sounds like this last couple days of the ladder were for you.
Well, basically they're handling me because I can be really angry. And I guess if some people doesn't calm me down, I could have screamed a lot more than I actually did on Twitter, which is never good, obviously, for nobody.
Yeah, it's hard because you have to look back at those tweets and be like, oh, I was like, you know how much anger. Like,
yeah, I mean, I have no shame for making them. I mean, that was pretty justified for those one at least.
Oh, I mean, sorry, I said the word you, but I didn't mean you. I guess I meant in general, more
yeah.
like maybe me. I look back on angry tweets and I was projecting is what was happening.
Sometimes it's too much, right? Yeah. That's why I stopped myself from doing more of them. But honestly, if I listened to myself, I would have complained the whole day on Twitter, like, this is unacceptable. Yeah. You cannot do this to me.
Yeah, I'm Ultraman. Just like when you walk into GOG and you yell at them and tell you to change the name. That's what you got to say. So
the arrogance itself. But actually, I also like talking to them because I'm really, I mean, like I said, I'm not a huge fancy guy. I'm not testing a lot of different shit. I'm the most unoriginal player you will ever see. And those guys are little genius there, deck building genius, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna go with my Emi shop, and they're like, hey, Morvran is playable now because he has 18 provisions, and I'm like, nah, he's just 6 points, right? He's not that good. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And then we're arguing for 2 days, and then I test the deck for 1 day, and I'm like, oh shit, you're right.
It's good. I mean, it's really good when you have people that change your point of view.
That's really good.
It's good to have people that help change your point of view because from the lofty position of you guys, you know, top 10 players, I imagine that taking suggestions when you see good results is not always easy. But when you have a team to support you and you know the skill of these players, it makes it a little bit more. You know, I didn't really think about it like that because you can be convinced. It could be something your opponents have played against you and you've beaten it. So maybe you just automatically have like a skewed opinion of it, or maybe it hasn't been refined yet, and now it has been. So yeah, the constant thinking and deck building.
That's the story of Onkra, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. That's the story of a deck like Saber did a Kra Commandos own. Mm-hmm. That's now the list everybody knows. And he played like the first day with it, and I faced it, and I wrecked it because it wasn't optimized, and was like, damn, this deck is shitty. And then 2 weeks later, I'm playing that, and I'm gaining 50 MMR in 1 day, and I'm like, oh, that deck is crazily good.
That's card games, man. That is the card gamiest thing you can say about. That's why snap judgments on cards and decks are. It's always good to let it breathe, and I think that one of my favorite things about the very first fix or the very first patch we got for Gwent that just changed provision cost but didn't change power levels was. It let us breathe a bit in an oppressive atmosphere without actually changing too much. And I think that I just wanted to talk to you guys more about the cards that are really polarizing at the moment. As we've seen big changes come into the game, like Regis Higher Vampire getting a huge change, Shiro getting a huge change, Sihil getting huge changes. Like the cards that felt like they couldn't find a real place in the game at their power level, so they needed to be actually changed and kind of redesigned a little bit. And lately, be it today or yesterday, I mean, I was playing it yesterday and it seemed pretty damn good. Today's complaint, or this week's complaint, is Dragon Stream, a card that was actually recently nerfed before. I mean, it was always good, but it was always very good. It was recently nerfed, but now is posing problems for players. I think that cards like this are okay to exist in general. How do you guys feel about Dragon Stream's power level right now? I have my own take on it, but a card that requires this kind of tech, that can offer you the amount of value that it could offer. Dragonstream Nivellen specifically gets you about 30 points maximum if you have 9 units that all take Dragonstream damage on the row when it goes off. But it can be countered in a lot of ways. What do you think about Dragonstream? Is this a situation where maybe we just need to let people deal with it, let it get optimized?
I could tell a little story about Dragonstream from last
Fantastic.
season. So I made a Morvran deck with Dragonstream, and I played it for a couple of days, like non-stop, just playing this Dragonstream deck. And I did really well with it at first. Felt really strong. I was like, this is a really good deck. All my teammates were like, oh no, you've become a DD player now.
I heard that too, like early.
But honestly, like on day 2, my results started to go downhill a little bit because the top players like Adzikov and many other players, they were remembering that I run it, and they would just bleed me in round 2, and the combo doesn't work, or maybe I'd get unlucky and not even draw the combo piece, and all of a sudden I'm just playing a bad deck. I think cards like that, they really thrive on the surprise factor, right? Like your opponent has no idea that you have it. Maybe they just dry pass round 2 because it seems logical to do that, and then they just lose the game for no real reason because you played a 27-point card. I don't think in its current state that it's like a particularly healthy card for the game, in my opinion, because it's just way above curve. 10 points for a card is strong, but 27's kind of ridiculous, right?
Well, when we're talking about like, there's a couple of factors to that. It's 27 points conditionally on the row, and it's 27 points conditionally that your opponent doesn't deal with it. Now, the thing about Nivellen not being counterable is probably its own separate thing, because the effect happens as it goes over to your opponent's turn. So you ultimately, even if your opponent has ways of moving out of it, it ultimately won't matter if you have that combo piece. Alessio, what is your take on Dragonstream's power level?
Well, first, I think Dragon's Dream cannot really be spoken about without speaking about, like you said, Nivellen. And the problem is we're dealing with a combo there. We're not dealing with one card. So obviously, nothing Dragon's Dream is going to kill the card itself.
Even though it just got heavily nerfed, too.
Yeah, it got heavily nerfed. But the problem is a provision nerf will never change that. That's like the nerf to Golden Frost, if you remember. The fact is, she was still played at 13 provision in some decks, just because even for 13 provision, she can do 18. And that was still, I mean, you still had the points, and that was still pretty much uncounterable. There was a Emir Zoltan deck at some point, even though Zoltan got pretty much nerfed too. And the thing is, basically, you don't care how much provision you're putting into that, because the thing is, you cannot lose. You don't need other power plays. You don't need other power plays to win. You don't need to have like a Blue Dream, an Old Spirit Tip, a Goliath. No. You just need this combo. And if this combo works, if there is no Earden, if you've got the Lassie, if you don't get bled, you've won. And that's it. And I think that the biggest problem is the binarity of the card. It's like, it's dumb. It's treated dumb. Because basically, if you're seeing a Morvran list as a crowd player, things like this, as a Scoia'tael player, you cannot bleed it. You cannot. That's not a possible strategy. If you do that, you're losing the game. So going through the second round, and if you don't know he is playing Dragon's Dream, you've lost the game. That's it. What can you do against that? With some faction, you can play around it. With like Monster, you can blade it. There's no problem with big boys, but there is factions that cannot do anything against that. There's factions that just straight up lose against that. And I think there's a huge problem with weather and artifacts that we kind of forgot about with all the nerfing patches. But the thing is, none of them got reworked. And we cannot have a game where a 12-point card does 27 and is countered by a 5 provision card.
It's just
because that's just too binary.
I guess, yeah. When the way you put it that way, that's a really good point. I mean, like my original, you can see I wrote a little bit here, like the idea that what I liked about Dragon's Dream, and this could be just a misplaced analysis, so I could just be wrong, but the way I like Dragon's Dream is that if Dream can be countered, and the counters to Dream aren't huge costs to the deck. So if Dream is meta, and you're countering against Dream, it's a very hostile environment for Dragon's Dream, which if you are already expecting it, which is much harder to do on normal ladder where you may never play the same player twice. But if you're just teching against it to stop it when you see it, it flat out the Dragon's Dream player at this point loses to the field when it's countered, whereas the field doesn't lose when they brick their weather clears, but they win slightly less. So the really, really powerful like solitaire type decks get worse in a meta where you have to tech against it. And it just narrows the field generally because it makes the deck that would have a high win rate win far, far less. The high win rate that's based on the combo, and it makes the decks that have the high win rate based on the fact that the deck is probably just an optimized superpower slightly less because it has a less optimized deck because it needs to run tech. So I feel like for the environment of the game, the dots seem to connect for me, especially considering the provision cost. But like you said, Alessio, the cost doesn't matter when you win the game because you played it and you got to the position where you can play it from, which many decks can still do. I was playing Gurnikora Dragon's Dream. It seemed fine. It actually was cleared once, and I still won because I won in a one-pointer thanks to Werecat doing the row damage for me. But I think that it's interesting. I want to see kind of like how the conversation evolves on this one here. Yeah, and also Ryshik is in the chat, as he is often for the podcast. One of the designers over there at Gwent, proposing an argument as well. But Green Knight, what were you going to say?
I think one of the issues with it in a way is the counters to it are to clear row effects from your side, right? So you could run the Scout or Iris. Suppose there are some other ways you can use Shoop to potentially override it with his Create Weather. But the point is if you want to counter it, you have to run cards which are effectively useless in other scenarios where there's no weather. So if it's just like if Dragon's Dream's not really a meta card, not many people are running it, then you're not going to run these row clears. And you're just going to randomly lose a game for no real reason. Like if we go back to old beta, and if we talk about like binary cards like Imlerith Sabbath, if you wanted to be safe against Sabbath, you could run cards that were actually useful in other matchups. You could run a Mandrake, you could run Scorch, for example. There was lots of different options that you could say, right, I'm not going to lose to Sabbath because I run this card, and this card is actually useful in other scenarios.
That's the thing, yeah. Mandrake is really good.
You don't really have that right now. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I guess if there's more weather, or if weather becomes more popular in different archetypes, then it could be different, I guess.
That's the thing, yeah, because since there's no other weather, you're not necessarily teching for it. Like artifacts, like Iris covers your bases because she's less brickable, because you may destroy an artifact on your way when you put that tech in. I mean, she has 9 provision points, so there is that part. But the Scout being a 4-point human for 5 is below average, but like better than Bomb Heaver if you wanted to compare a tech card like that. That's so true. It seems like the cost to counter it doesn't feel that high, but the cost, it's not so much, the cost is really that your deck feels worse, you being the player who is trying to deal with it. And that preparing for it at any given time means that you have a card that just is not as good in round 3. And it's the same thing where the tech card, if you have it and your opponent has the combo, you're winning. The tech card, you have it and your opponent just has a better hand than you, you might feel like you just lost the game because you had tech against this card that would beat you if you didn't have the answer for it. So it is, while I feel like from a deck building standpoint and like kind of like an averages standpoint, the card doesn't seem too bad. From a situational standpoint where you just won't have the answer sometimes or not, that is still, it's with Dragon's Dream being the sole row hazard to beat. It's just, I feel like weather effect clears are never going to be popular enough. But in a different environment, this we might not even be talking about this. It might be the worst weather in the game.
Yeah.
Like, takes 3 turns to go off. I don't know.
This could be. I remember at the end of the season, Adzikov and Malijan were playing that in Morvrun actually, and at the moment we knew that became bad, and they were switching, and we were switching like to put some of them in our decks, and basically we had anti-weathers, but then we would get like 10 or 20 games without facing them, and then we're like, I mean, seriously, if I'm facing him one time in 20, do I have to run this card? Did this card win me more game or lose me more games?
Right.
And actually, you're like, there is no good answer. Because at the moment, I'm going to take it off my deck, I'm going to face Adzikov and lose. And that's the problem. Because the game is not decided anymore by who's the best or who's playing the best or even the matchup. The game is purely decided by at what time you are facing your opponent. Did your opponent take that card out of his deck, or did you actually put the counter in yours? And to me, that's the biggest problem, because that's actually not about skills, that's actually not about playing well, that's actually just about, did I want to play this card? Did I want to play this card at this moment? Because earlier in the day I was playing this card, and then I didn't face you. And that's actually totally RNG.
So
100%.
Would you say that Koloman is just a really good guesser then? Just
actually, he did not play that much of that.
I'm saying
he's mainly playing. I mean, that's maybe not the best example, because actually he's not playing a lot of greedy strategies. He's just really good boss at deck building, and he's really, really regular when he's playing the game. Like, he's focused every single game. He's not a good guesser at all. That's not what I meant. But the thing is, basically, like, you're reducing my point to something I didn't say. Like, I'm not saying that for every single game. I'm saying that for some games. For the games where Dragon's Dream is involved.
Yeah, and losses are much more important than wins, because of how hard it hurts you. So I suppose that, yeah, getting caught off guard.
But the thing is, it's not about win rate or even balancing. It's not about that. It's not even about the deck being so good or the card being so good you have to nerf it. That's not really how it works. I mean, why did you nerf Spears Garnicora? Because it felt bad, not because it was good. So that's why the hotfix went in.
Sure.
I think that's the same problem with Dragon's Dream. We're not gonna nerf that because it's OP or because it's in every single deck. The thing is, it feels bad. It feels unskilling. Yeah, I mean, it feels unskilled. It doesn't feel like you have control over your game. It doesn't feel like you have any good situations with some factions or order. So it's just a feels bad card. It's a I have won or I have lost card. That's a binary card.
Sure.
And the thing is, in Gwent, with so little resources compared to other card games, when a card is doing that much impact, it's winning or losing you the game straight up. There's no way to counter that. There's no way to play around it. I tried a lot. I can tell you. I tried to bleed Adzikov in round 2 in mirrors, and I was like, I'm trying to bleed in the mirror. What the fuck? What the fuck is that? I'm not even sure he's running Dragon's Dream, but I have to do now.
Yeah.
That was straight up bad. The good play would have been go to round 3. Maybe he's not running it. That would have been the good play. But then if he's running it, I've auto loss.
See, that's the point. That's the point of view I didn't really have on it, and I think that you explained it well enough that you've changed my mind a little bit, because it is. The thing is, like, these cards that have no ceiling, or a ceiling that's like row based, they're all problem cards. The only card that wasn't like that was Spear and Shield at 5 provisions, but mostly that was also because of Epidemic, and it was just another case of a card that was priced at a certain point and the value that it could get.
Sihil.
And it's Sihil as well. But that, yeah, the value they can get is there is no ceiling on these cards, and when there's no ceiling on the cards, the cost, like you were saying before, I think you were trying to get at the fact that the cost doesn't matter, because the value you get from it will be more than what your opponent could just do with any other cards, really. And having a ceiling on the cards, like Commander's Horn has a ceiling. It can only ever be 15 points, or 30 with Skellen, you could say. So that is, it's a very strong card. Commander's Horn is very high priced. So you get 15 points for 14 provisions on a condition that's a fair condition. Dragon's Dream condition is less and can get almost double the amount in the right situation. And I get it. I mean, the more we're talking about it, the more you hear my dog, we hear some keyboards tapping, you hear my dog. It's a little noisy time over here on my side of the podcast, but I think it's fine. It's probably like a healthy conversation to have, I think, but it is, people have their eyes on it, and I'm glad that we could get your point of view, guys, on this one. I want to actually see if the chat has anything to ask for you all, because I think that it's time to maybe move on to the chat here, because they've been pretty good, and this is a pretty interesting discussion. So if you have any questions for anybody in the chat, tag me at McBeard in the chat, and we will get to you in just a moment, right after this short break. Once again, we are supported by our Commandos and my dog.
Commandos!
Our patron, patreon.com/commandershorn. We do have a lot of comments in the chat. This is a pretty big conversation, I guess, about this card, Dragon's Dream. So, generally, though, I think it's just the environment that we're running in right now, where there's just not a lot of weather. Before we had the Silver Mages, people running weather clears were also running a card that generally would give them removal value. Ida is the great example of that. And since Dagon was very popular in a lot of situations, you'd come in contact with weather on a semi-regular basis, as a lot of these cards also created weather. Ida, Death Mold, I think they all created weather. So you had cards that removed weather and created weather. So you saw weather commonly enough. You knew that you wanted to hold on to your clears, but you also could save them for removal. It felt a bit more engaging to play in a world where weather was a thing, when you also had these modal mages that could create and remove it. And I don't know if that's just a property of those cards specifically, or if it was a property of weather being better, or more accessible, or better to build a deck around than it is now. I feel like, I don't know, like I feel like those cards are, there's a piece of Gwent that's missing with those cards. I feel like there was something very iconic about those particular cards. Even though they were kind of fairly homogenized by the end as to what they could do, it was still good. Like I didn't like seeing Ida come out of a runestone, but I generally liked that those cards existed. What do you guys think about that?
I think the Silver Mages were great, like, because they just offered the flexibility. So, like, right now you've got the row clears and the artifact removal, but that's all they do, right? They can do nothing. They're either a bad card or they're game-winningly great, but most of the time they're just going to be a bad card. Mm-hmm. Silver Mages, like you said, they had so much flexibility in terms of what they could do, and whether, like, the thing that they were answering was widespread enough and had as so there was lots of different types of weather, for example, whereas right now there's just a very limited amount. But yeah, I think it's the flexibility is the main thing. I'd love to see flexible cards like that back in Gwent. So like maybe destroy an artifact and lock a unit, for example. You could put that on one card, for example. That'd be cool, because then it's not going to be a terrible card for you.
Great card, actually. How would you not? Yeah. Who would not run that card? I guess it would have to be very expensive.
Yeah, I think
it's a really good card.
Just make it a faction card, so not every deck can run that.
yeah, that's the thing. When you know your faction can do like very specific things, like that's one of the more engaging parts about Gwent right now, is that at least for me at the moment when I play, my matchups are diverse enough that I'm really thinking all the time when it comes to like who I'm playing against and what might be in each of these decks. I know that's always something that happens in Gwent, but it just feels more so these days that there are different bronze packages you can run, different combo pieces you can put in that don't change very much. Lefty Throw Righty asking, what do you think about full test in the current meta, and can he be viable? I think yes, because 3 Zeals in a game without having to put Temerian Drummers in your deck, you still put Vest in your deck, but you don't have to put Drummers in the deck. You get kind of that effect built in and always in your hand. I think that's pretty strong, and I don't think that the provisions hold full test back in the same way that I don't think Gurnikora is held back by her provisions. So I think full test is probably just, it may end up just being a preference. because he does get the boost as well. But boosting means less because you can just use the orders anyway, so protecting it means less. It's just a different way of thinking now that Meave's kind of set a new standard for Northern Realms. Green Knight, what do you think about this? Because Green Knight, you like Northern Realms. You were whispering spicy Northern Realms list to me as soon as the patch dropped. You were one of the few players on the Pro Ladder top 20 that actually had a score for Northern Realms, 1,000 points, no less. It wasn't great, but I don't even know if you even finished your placements with that. But you still tried. You believed in them at one point. How do you feel about full test right now, and kind of in comparison to this new landscape with Meave?
How do I feel about full test? So full test, I think he's fine from a design point. He perhaps just needs more cards to work with.
And he got Regis recently. You could say he did get Regis Higher Vampire as his own personal pet.
Yeah, I think full test is fine. He got maybe nerfed a little bit too hard. I think if he was at 165, it'd be a little bit better. But the thing about Meave's doing really well with NR right now because she's keeping engines alive, and that's what full test was not doing. I think when we see more cards introduced into the game, you might see full test just come back and be the best NR leader, or maybe it'll be one of the other NR leaders. But right now, he just feels a little bit limited by the card pool and the fact that Meave just seems to be doing a better job with the current card pool.
And Jamoni's asking a question to everybody, which leader who isn't super strong now has the most potential? And it feels like, I mean, full test for me, I think is on that list. And I also think that Emir is now on that list because his potential was high, but he's not super strong now because he got hit and nerfed. He got nerfed very hard there. Alessio, what do you think leader has the most potential to be good, but maybe isn't really good right now? It's a thinker.
That's a complicated one. I'd hesitate between Folters, that's a good one. Because he could be really strong, and I mean, he's still really strong against Woodland meta, against Big Boy meta, against some Garnicora decks. But the problem is, he's a reactive one, and thus he's never gonna be top tier. You know what I mean? He's gonna remove targets from someone, so he's gonna always be like this stealthy T2, like, oh, I'm gonna be really boring to deal with for the top tier deck. Woodland is gonna struggle with me, and I think that's his place right now. The one with a lot of potential that was actually totally OP during the
last
not the alpha, how is it called? I don't remember, but the beta of Homecoming.
Right, okay, yeah, like we're talking like the October,
you know what I mean,
from October to November, like, or are you talking about the? I think I know what you mean. I think I know what you mean.
The patch realm,
yeah.
I have no idea
right.
how is it called anymore. But actually, when the little Aracross wasn't doomed, and thus you could play it with the Grave Hag, and that was all consume once again. You know, the consume from Yuli 2017, I wanna say. Yuli 2017. You know, there was a OP Dagon everybody played, and I was at the time really fancy, and I was playing a consume, and I was cancering the ladder with that, with this Grave Hag totally OP. So I think the Aracross Queen, actually, if she had like other cards that are not as easily killable as her actual engines, if she had more than a wombo combo, she could be totally OP. Because actually, it just feels like it's one huge wombo combo that if it works, it's incredible, and 99% of the time it doesn't work.
Yeah, Aracross Queen.
So that's why the leader is a bit. I think that was the worst leader, right? That's what everybody's telling, but I think it actually can be really good, just if there is a way to make the engines live like Meave did to Northern Realm. She can be totally OP.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen because, you know, we'll have 100 new cards in no time. That just obviously changes the entire world. And I hope that, I hope the meta stays as diverse as it currently is. I think that, there's some sharp edges out there, but it really feels, I mean, I just feel like it feels like I just love playing. Like I had plans yesterday to do 2 things on my stream, but I just ended up playing Gwent, and I played for like 2 hours longer than I normally do. Because I was playing Dragon's Dream Granakora, and I was high off that drug, right?
You're degenerate.
I was high off that drug, man. I didn't realize what I was doing until I heard you guys talking about it. Now I feel like a terrible person.
Don't worry, we've all been degenerate. Like, I have to confess.
You just gotta win sometimes.
I played 8-Nay Artifact when it was OP to get to number 6 spot in the first season. Sorry, guys. Now I have to go.
Guys, it's been great chatting with you.
So when you asked us, were you hoping we would turn around and say, "Oh, Dragon's Dream, what a cool
No.
card."
I was not hoping that, but I thought that I didn't think that you would have convinced me that the problem is as severe. I didn't think that the problem was as severe because I felt like the tech situation for row effects was better, but it's not really so much. It sounds like the downside of changing your deck is actually far higher than I was giving any weight to. So that's the difference, because I didn't think that teching was so bad, but it is so bad in a way, I suppose. Guys, it's been great chatting with you. There were a couple more questions in the chat. What would weather look like at 6? Oh man, I don't know. That's a little low. But I feel like we're probably going to see a revamp to weather before we see those cards change. We'll see a card that cares about them, or they'll get a card type that matters in some way. I feel like that is just like a holding pattern right now. Like, if you want to play weather, you can. We made them a little bit better for 7. You could maybe play Triss Telekinesis and pretend you're Dagon. But it's otherwise, it's not really out there. Although, like we've covered, people just aren't running clears. So if you really want to get that, if you want to get that weather value, if you want to mess with people, make them row stack, play row stack cards. I think that's maybe on the verge of being good, because Lacerate is a good card that's priced well. Sabrina is a very good card that's priced well. Werecat is okay. Row attacking strategies, if weather got better, I already like influencing my opponent's board with trebuchets, so I can just hit them on the front row, but we'll have to see. Things always change. Guys, where can people find you when you're out there doing your thing on your streams? Green Knight, do you not have Twitter, or are you just 100%, you're not on that platform? Because I couldn't find you out there. I wanted to tag you when we were going live.
Yeah, I don't have an active Twitter at the moment. Not big on the social media, but you can find me over at Discord, on the TLG Discord, or if you're on the Everything Gwent Discord, you should be able to find me on there. And you can shoot me a message if you want some help with decks or anything like that.
TLG Discord is public Discord. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and perhaps somebody in the chat can provide a link to that as well, because there's a lot of great discussion happening on the TLG Discord. Alessio1996, aka Ultraman Gog, return his phone calls. Where can people find you at on Twitch, Twitter, etc.?
Well, Ultraman1996. Truly original, like I said.
I like it.
Even in my nicknames for my Twitch, and basically you tagged me in every single Twitter you did for this podcast, so I think they will be able to find me if they're searching.
Right on. All right, that's great. For me, you can find the podcast on Twitter at Commander's Horn, and you can email the podcast at commandershornpodcast@gmail.com. A little behind on mail, so if you're waiting for a response from me, thanks for your patience. And you can find me at McBeardCH on Twitter, McBearded on Twitch, where you're watching this program right now, and McBeard on YouTube, where you also could be watching this program right now. Thanks so much, guys, for another great 2-guest interview that went a little long, that had just some great discussions. I really appreciate your time, guys. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, mate.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up here, and thanks everybody for joining in the chat as well. Thanks to Rysick and every regular that shows up here, and to everybody who asked a question I couldn't get to. Really appreciate it so much. We'll see you next week for the Valentine's Day episode, or the Valentine's Week episode. And I think I've got that lined up, but I'm not going to break anything yet. Follow me on Twitter and find out. But until next time, thanks for joining us, everybody. This is McBeard. Best of luck on the path.